The room was silent except for the slow sound of breathing. Lyra opened her eyes and felt fire in her arm. Her vision was blurry, but she could feel something heavy pulling at her right arm. When her eyes cleared, she froze. Her arm was stuck, glued into a strange black resin that looked alive. It crawled up her skin like a dark shadow. The more she moved, the more it tightened. Her heart pounded in fear. On her homeworld, she had seen this resin before. It was called the living glue, a nightmare substance that her people never understood. When it touched flesh, it refused to let go. The only cure her people knew was cruel. Cut the arm, save the life, that was the only way. Her breath came in short gasps. She touched the resin with her other hand, and it pulsed like a beating heart. Her body shook, her thoughts raced. She knew what was coming. She would lose her. "Arm," she whispered to herself in fear. "Not me, please, not me." A sudden voice made her jump. "Stay still," it said, deep and steady. She turned and saw him, a human, tall, strong, with sharp eyes full of focus. His name was Captain Daniel. She had heard of him before, a stubborn human engineer traveling with the fleet. He stepped closer and studied the resin on her arm. The alien crew around them whispered nervously. They already knew the truth. This was hopeless. The girl would lose her arm. One alien, older and wiser, said, "Cut it now before it spreads. She has no chance." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She imagined the blade, the pain, the loss, but before she could speak, Daniel raised his hand to silence them. "No," he said calmly. "We are not cutting her arm." The words hit the crew like thunder. Every eye turned toward him in shock. No one had ever refused the rule, but Daniel's face showed no doubt. Lyra stared at him, confused. She thought humans were practical, logical, quick to sacrifice for survival. But here was this human, looking at her glued arm as if it was not the end but the beginning. Her voice trembled. "You don't understand. The glue is alive. It never lets go. My people tried everything. The only way is to cut." Daniel knelt beside her, his eyes steady. "I understand fear," he said softly, "but humans don't give up so easily." His tone was not loud, but it carried weight. It made Lyra's heart pause. There was something in his voice, unyielding, unstoppable, like a mountain standing against a storm. The resin pulsed harder, crawling a little higher. Lyra screamed and pulled, but Daniel held her still. "Don't fight it blindly," he said. "Let me think." The alien crew shook their heads. To them, he was wasting time. One muttered, "Humans are reckless." Another whispered, "He will kill her." But Daniel ignored them all. Instead, he pulled out a scanner from his tool belt. He studied the strange black resin, eyes narrowing with curiosity. The scanner beeped and buzzed, showing strange signals. He muttered to himself, "Organic, reactive, feeding on movement, maybe even energy." His lips curved in the smallest of smiles. "Interesting," he said. Lyra felt her stomach twist. How could he call this nightmare interesting? Her people had feared this thing for centuries, and yet here was a human staring at it like it was a puzzle. Her voice cracked. "Please, don't play with it. Just end it. Cut it before it's too late." Daniel looked at her directly, his eyes sharp. "No," he repeated, firm as steel. "You are not losing your arm today." The silence that followed was heavy. The crew didn't know what to say. Lyra didn't know whether to hate him, for giving false hope, or cling to him like a lifeline. But deep inside, something strange stirred in her chest. A flicker of belief, a question she had never asked before. Could there be another way? Daniel stood, his presence like a shield. He began preparing his tools, speaking in that calm, steady tone. "I will try everything, and if it fails, then we think of the last choice, not before." The resin pulsed again. As if angry, it was alive. It was aware. It seemed to challenge him, tightening its grip around Lyra's arm. Lyra cried out, but Daniel didn't flinch. He leaned closer, almost whispering to the glue itself. "You picked the wrong human." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Some thought he was insane, but Lyra's breathing slowed, just a little, because for the first time since the nightmare began, she wasn't facing it alone. The room was no longer filled with hopeless whispers. It was filled with the steady sound of one human refusing to surrender, and that sound was stronger than fear, the human refusal. The crew waited in silence, their eyes fixed on Daniel. Lyra sat on the floor, her arm trembling as the resin pulsed with dark life. Her people had told her all her life that this thing was death for any limb it touched. She remembered her cousin who had lost his leg to the same black glue. She remembered the screams, the blood, the blade cutting flesh. Her body shook at the thought, but here was Daniel, a human who refused the rule. He stood tall and calm, as if the danger was only another challenge. His voice carried across the room, steady and unshaken. "We are not cutting her arm," he said again. The aliens hissed in disbelief. One shouted, "Human, you are blind. She will die if you delay." Another whispered, "This is madness." Daniel didn't even look. At them, his eyes were locked on Lyra. "You must trust me," he said to her. She wanted to scream that he was wrong, but something in his eyes stopped her. There was no fear in him, no hesitation, only stubborn determination. Her people had always feared the glue, but Daniel looked at it with fire in his gaze, a fire that made her wonder. The resin pulsed again, climbing another inch toward her shoulder. She gasped in pain, but Daniel's hand was on her shoulder, steadying her. "Easy," he said. "It wants you to panic. Don't give it what it wants." Lyra's teeth clenched as tears rolled down her cheeks. "How can you stop it?" she whispered. "We tried for generations. Lasers, acid, even fire. Nothing worked." Her voice broke. "You don't know what you are facing." Daniel crouched, his face inches from the black resin. "Maybe I don't," he admitted. "But I know one thing. Humans don't quit, not until the last breath." The words struck her like a hammer. She had never heard anyone speak like that. Her people gave up quickly. They accepted loss toe. Save what remained, but this human spoke as if failure was not even an option. The crew exchanged worried glances. One alien, older and cautious, stepped forward. "You are risking her life and ours, human," he said. Daniel looked at him and replied in a voice that was calm but sharp, "I am saving her life, not risking it." The elder shook his head and turned away, muttering, "Humans are fools." Daniel returned to Lyra and knelt beside her again. "I need you to fight with me," he said softly. She blinked through her tears. "Fight." "Yes." He said, "Don't surrender, not yet." Lyra swallowed hard. Torn between fear and a strange new hope, her people had always said hope was dangerous, but Daniel made it sound like hope was the only weapon they had. He took out more tools from his belt, a small laser cutter, a plasma torch, and a vial of freezing mist. Each tool gleamed with human engineering, simple yet powerful. He tested the torch against a sample of the resin on the floor. The black substance hissed, pulled back for a second, then tightened stronger than before. Daniel frowned. "It adapts fast." The crew gasped, but Daniel's eyes only grew sharper. "Good," he whispered. "A fight worth having." Lyra could not believe her ears. He sounded almost excited, as if this was not horror but a puzzle. Her fear clashed with confusion. Why would a human risk everything for a stranger? Why would he fight so hard against something that her people had already accepted as impossible? She watched him move with purpose, scanning, testing, thinking. Every time the resin reacted, he adjusted his plan. Not once did he show fear. Not once did he step back. It was as if he carried a storm inside him that nothing could stop. The resin pulsed faster, almost angry now. It squeezed Lyra's arm so tight she cried out. Daniel gritted his teeth and pressed the scanner closer. "It reacts to energy," he muttered. "Heat makes it stronger, cutting feeds it, cold slows it, but not enough." He looked at her and gave a small smile. "See, we are learning already." Her heart pounded in her chest. Learning, he called it learning. Her people had called it doom, death, and despair. And this human called it learning, she whispered, almost without knowing why. "You are strange," Daniel chuckled. "I get that a lot." The crew was restless, muttering in the background. Some wanted to drag Lyra away, to end this with a blade before it was too late, but something in Daniel's presence held them back. He was only one human among many aliens, yet his will filled the room like a giant. It was as if he had already decided the outcome, and no one dared challenge him. Lyra's breathing slowed, just a little. Even though her arm burned and the resin crawled higher, she found herself watching Daniel, clinging to the sound of his voice. He spoke with such certainty that her fear began to crack. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps there was another way, and... As the resin pulsed like a living heart, as the crew whispered of doom and madness, one thought echoed in her mind. Humans do not give up. Not ever. First attempts, Daniel set his tools on the floor in a neat row. Each one glimmered in the dim light of the ship's med bay. The crew watched with uneasy eyes, some whispering prayers, others muttering curses. Lyra sat trembling, her arm still, trapped in the pulsing black resin. The substance clung to her like a parasite. Feeding, waiting, growing stronger with each second, Daniel picked up the small plasma torch first. He ignited the flame, a thin line of bright heat. The crew gasped, fearing he would burn her alive. But Daniel moved carefully, directing the heat. Not on her skin, but on the resin itself. The black glue hissed, quivered, and then pulsed harder. The resin thickened, tightening around Lyra's arm as if mocking his attempt. Lyra screamed, her voice sharp and raw. Daniel shut the flame immediately, his jaw clenched. Too much heat, he muttered. It adapts too fast. The elder alien shook his head. Fool, you are feeding it. Daniel ignored him, already reaching for another tool. He held up a vial of freezing mist, the canister frosted with cold. Let's see how you like this, he whispered to the resin. He sprayed the mist, white fog curling around Lyra's arm. The resin stiffened, cracking slightly. For a moment, hope flickered in Lyra's eyes, but then the crack sealed and the resin pulsed again, even stronger. Daniel cursed under his breath. Cold slows it, but not enough. Lyra's breathing grew shallow, her lips trembling. She whispered, Stop, please. Every attempt only makes it worse. Her voice was filled with despair. Daniel turned to her, his eyes hard but kind. No, every attempt teaches us something. We are closer than before. He pointed at the resin. It hated the cold. That means it has limits. His tone carried certainty, as if failure was only another step toward victory. The crew groaned, muttering among themselves. Madness, one said, reckless, another spat. But still, none of them dared to interfere. Daniel's will was like iron, and his presence filled the room, even when wrong. He sounded like a man who would eventually win. He picked up the laser cutter, its beam sharp and thin. Hold still, he told Lyra, his voice calm despite the sweat on his forehead. Lyra's heart pounded, her eyes wide with fear. She wanted to scream no, but her voice refused to leave her throat. Daniel aimed carefully, firing the beam at the edge of the resin. The black glue sizzled, shivered, and then lashed out. A tendril. Shot from it, wrapping tighter around Lyra's arm, she cried out, her body jerking. Daniel shut the beam, his jaw tightening. The scanner beeped wildly, showing the resin had grown thicker, feeding on the energy. Daniel muttered, It learns, it takes power, and uses it. The elder shouted, Enough! She will die by your hands. Daniel spun to face him, eyes blazing. She will die if we give up, and I will not. The room fell silent again, his words striking like thunder. Lyra's tears rolled down her cheeks, but inside her chest something strange grew. Hope, fragile but alive, Daniel crouched in front of her, his voice softer now. I know it hurts, but listen to me. We are learning its rules. Lyra shook her head. Rules don't matter. It always wins. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Not this time. He adjusted his scanner, replaying the data. The resin's reaction to heat, to cold, to energy. Every failure was mapped, every detail recorded. Daniel studied it like a hunter learning his prey. Lyra stared at him, amazed by his focus. People had always given up after one attempt, but this human treated failure as a ladder. Every mistake was a step higher. Closer to the top, the resin pulsed again, its black veins crawling nearer to her shoulder. Time was running out. Daniel placed his hand gently on her other shoulder. "Stay with me," he said. "Don't let it take your spirit." She looked into his eyes and whispered, "Why? Why do you fight so hard for me? You don't even know me." Daniel gave a small smile, tired but unshaken. "Because humans never walk away from a fight worth winning." The crew muttered in disbelief. To them, this was not courage, it was madness. But Lyra felt something shift inside, the way he spoke, the way he refused to bow. It was like staring into a storm and realizing it would never bend. Her fear did not vanish, but it was no longer alone. It stood beside something stronger. Hope. Daniel stood, wiping sweat from his brow. He had failed with fire, with cold, with energy, but his eyes were sharper than before. Every failure had fed him, not broken him. He turned back to the resin, pointing at it like a soldier pointing at an enemy. "You can fight, you can adapt, but so can I," he said firmly. The crew shivered at the tone in his voice. It was not the sound of defeat, but the promise of war. And as the resin pulsed again, alive and defiant, Daniel's smile widened just slightly. The real battle was only beginning, the human way. The room was heavy with silence. The alien crew stood at a distance, whispering to each other. Their eyes full of doubt, Lyra sat trembling, her trapped arm throbbing in pain, the black resin pulsing stronger with every heartbeat. She felt weak, afraid, and close to breaking. But Daniel stood tall, his eyes burning with stubborn fire. He looked at the resin as if it was a challenge, not a curse. He had failed with fire, failed with cold, failed with energy. Yet his face showed no defeat, only deeper thought. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. Her people would have given up long ago, but this human looked like he was only getting started. Daniel paced slowly, his hands behind his back, his mind racing. Then he stopped and spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Do you know why humans survive?" he asked, not looking at anyone in particular. The crew frowned, confused by the question. Lyra whispered weakly, "Because you fight." Daniel shook his head. "Not just fight. We adapt, we learn, we refuse to accept one answer." He crouched beside Lyra and met her frightened eyes. "Your people see this thing and think only of fear, only of loss. You see one path. Cut the arm and live. But humans, we always look for another path, no matter how impossible it looks." Lyra's lips trembled. "And if there is no other path?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Then we make one," the crew muttered, unimpressed. "Arrogant words!" one alien spat. But Lyra felt her chest tighten because somehow she believed him. There was weight in his words. Like stone pressed into her heart. Maybe humans were not arrogant. Maybe they were simply too stubborn to die. Daniel pulled a small device from his belt. Not a weapon, but an old recorder. He pressed a button, and soft sounds filled the air. It was music, human music, a gentle rhythm of drums and strings. The crew tilted their heads in confusion. Lyra blinked. "What is that?" Daniel answered. "The heartbeat of my people." The resin shivered at the sound, its surface rippling. Daniel's eyes lit up. "It responds," he whispered. "Not to fire, not to cold, but to patterns." He leaned closer, studying its reactions. The resin pulsed in rhythm with the beat. Slower now, weaker. Lyra gasped. "It's listening." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. It feeds on chaos, but music gives it order. It confuses it, maybe even weakens it," the elder alien growled. "This is nonsense. Sounds cannot fight flesh." Daniel ignored him, turning the music louder. The resin writhed, twisting like it was uncomfortable. For the first time, Lyra felt the grip on her arm loosen, even if only slightly. Her eyes widened with hope. "It's working." Daniel's smile grew, small but real. "You see, this is the human way. We don't just fight harder, we fight smarter. We take what looks like weakness and turn it into strength." Lyra stared at him, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from wonder. No one in her world had ever thought of this. No one had ever dared. The resin pulsed violently. Trying to resist the sound, Daniel adjusted the rhythm, shifting the beats. The black veins slowed again. Confused, He laughed softly. Yes, you can fight back, but I will outlast you, Lyra whispered. You sound like you're talking to it, Daniel replied. I am. Everything that fights us deserves an answer, the crew murmured in shock as the resin's surface cracked slightly. It was still strong, but it was no longer growing. For the first time since it touched her, the spread had stopped. Lyra felt tears in her eyes, not of pain, but of relief. Her lips trembled. You are really doing it. Daniel looked at her, his expression softening. No, we are doing it, because you are still here, still fighting, even when it hurts. Lyra lowered her gaze, ashamed. I wanted to give up, she whispered. Daniel placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Everyone wants to give up, but wanting and doing are not the same. You stayed, you endured. That is strength. Her chest swelled with something she had never felt before, not just hope, but pride. For the first time, she felt like she was more than a victim, more than prey. Maybe with him, she could win. The resin shuddered, again as if angry, its black tendrils twitching. Daniel turned the music into sharper beats, shifting from gentle rhythm to a pounding march. The resin spasmed, its hold tightening and loosening in confusion. Daniel grinned, sweat dripping down his temple. Now we know its weakness, rhythm, order, persistence. The crew no longer muttered. They watched in silence, caught between disbelief and awe. A single human, fighting an enemy no one had ever beaten, and slowly turning the tide, Lyra whispered. Your people are different, Daniel. Daniel chuckled softly. Not different, just too stubborn to stop. The resin fought harder, but the music fought back, and in that battle of sound and shadow, Lyra saw something she would never forget. The truth of the human way: never surrender, never stop searching, never stop fighting. The breakthrough. The medbay lights flickered as the sound of human music filled the room. The resin shivered again, rippling like water disturbed by stone. The crew stared in disbelief, for the first time watching the black glue weaken, even, if only for moments. Daniel's eyes were sharp, scanning every movement, every tremor of the strange living substance. He could see it was reacting, not to fire, not to cold, but to rhythm, to patterns. Lyra's chest rose and fell with quick breaths, her body trembling from pain and exhaustion. Yet her wide eyes followed Daniel, as if he carried the only light in a storm. Why is it reacting? She whispered, her voice shaky. Daniel didn't look at her, his focus locked on the resin. Because chaos is its strength, he said, and rhythm is its weakness. The resin pulsed faster, fighting back, tightening around her arm. Lyra cried out in pain, and Daniel immediately changed the beat. The music shifted from heavy drums to a slow, steady pulse, like a heartbeat. The resin twitched, loosening for a fraction of a second. Daniel's lips curved in a grin. Yes, that's it. You don't like order, do you? The crew exchanged nervous glances, their disbelief slowly turning into curiosity. One whispered, Could he truly be right? Another shook his head. Impossible. Sound cannot fight matter. But still they did not look away. Even the elder, who had shouted for amputation, was silent now. Daniel lowered the volume, then raised it suddenly, testing its limits. The resin reacted, its pulsing unstable as if confused. Patterns, Daniel murmured. You live on disorder, but humans live on rhythm. He tapped the console and played another file, this time a simple melody with repeating notes. The resin jerked again, as if retreating from the sound. Lyra gasped. It's working, Daniel. It's really working. Her voice was filled with hope for the first time since the nightmare began. Daniel nodded firmly, though sweat ran down his temple. It's only the beginning, he said. We've found its crack. Now we widen it. He turned to the crew, his voice commanding. Bring me every sound file you have, every recording, every rhythm your ships carry. The aliens hesitated, unsure. Daniel's eyes hardened. Do it now. Reluctantly, they obeyed, gathering old recordings, beeps, and alien tones. Daniel sorted through them quickly, mixing rhythms, layering, beats. The medbay filled with a strange symphony of human and alien sounds. The resin writhed violently, twitching like it was being pulled apart. Lyra's eyes widened as she felt it loosen slightly. Her fingers, once numb, twitched with a spark of life. She whispered, "I can move, just a little." Daniel grinned, his voice fierce. "Good! Keep trying! Don't let it win!" She pushed, straining against the grip, every nerve screaming. The resin tightened, but Daniel shifted the rhythm again, forcing it to weaken. The battle became a dance, human persistence, against alien biology. The elder finally stepped forward, his voice trembling. "No one has ever done this," he admitted. "Not in all our history." Daniel didn't look up, his voice sharp and strong. "Because you gave up and humans don't." The elder fell silent, unable to argue. Lyra's breaths came in gasps, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was weak, but she fought, not just because of Daniel, but because of the fire he had lit inside her. A fire that whispered, "Don't surrender." Her people had taught her fear, but this human taught her defiance, and for the first time she felt stronger than the resin, not weaker. Daniel changed the rhythm again. Sharper, faster, almost like war. Drums, the resin quivered violently, small cracks appearing along its surface. Lyra screamed as pain shot through her arm, but she did not stop pulling. Daniel shouted over the noise, "Yes! Fight it! It's breaking! It can't hold forever!" The crew gasped as they saw the black glue split slightly, a small piece crumbling onto the floor. It twitched like a dying insect, then went still. Lyra's eyes filled with tears of disbelief. "It broke. It actually broke," she whispered. Daniel gave a fierce grin. "Told you. Everything breaks." If you push hard enough, the resin still clung to most of her arm, but now it was trembling, weaker than before. The crew stared in stunned silence, their fear shifting into awe. For centuries, the living glue had been undefeated, but here, in a single night, one human had forced it to retreat, not with fire, not with blades, but with rhythm, with persistence, with refusal to surrender. Lyra's voice shook as she looked at him. "You found the way, Daniel." Daniel shook his head. "We found it, you and me together." She blinked at him, her heart heavy with gratitude. No one had ever fought for her like this. No one had ever believed she could be saved. The resin pulsed again, weaker now but still alive. Daniel narrowed his eyes, determination sharper than ever. "This is only the start," he said. "We've cracked its armor, now we finish it." And as the strange music filled the med bay, as the crew watched in stunned silence, Lyra realized the truth of what she was seeing. Humans were not dangerous because of their weapons. They were dangerous because they never gave up. The struggle. The med bay was filled with sound, rhythm. After rhythm echoing off the walls, the resin writhed and twisted, its black veins shaking with every beat, pieces of it cracked, some falling like burnt ash onto the floor. But even as it weakened, it fought back. It pulsed harder, faster, sending shocks of pain through Lyra's arm. She screamed, her body jerking. Her breath sharp and broken, Daniel caught her shoulders, holding her steady, his voice firm. "Stay with me, don't let it win." Her teeth clenched, tears rolling down her face. "I can't. It's too strong," she cried. Daniel shook his head, his voice like iron. "No, it's only strong if you give it your fear." The resin pulsed again, wrapping tighter, cutting into her flesh, Lyra's. Vision blurred, darkness dancing at the edge of her sight. The crew shouted in panic. "Enough, human! You are killing her!" One cried. "She will not last!" Another yelled. But Daniel ignored them, his eyes locked on Lyra. "You hear?" "Me," he said, his tone commanding. "You are stronger than this thing." "Stronger than fear," Lyra gasped, her body trembling. Her people had always taught surrender, always taught sacrifice, but here was a human telling her she was more, that she could fight, that she had to fight. Something in his words lit fire. In her chest, her scream turned into a roar of defiance. She pulled against the resin, even as it burned. The black substance thrashed, its tendrils lashing like angry snakes. It tried to cover her shoulder, climbing higher. Daniel adjusted the rhythm again, switching from heavy drums to sharp, fast beats. The resin spasmed, cracking again. Daniel's face was drenched in sweat, his eyes fierce. "It's weakening. Don't stop now," he urged. Lyra sobbed, but her grip tightened, her will hardening like stone. The elder stepped closer, his face pale. "This is madness," he whispered. "No one survives this fight," Daniel snapped back without looking. "No one survives if they give up. That's the difference." The resin shuddered violently, sending waves of pain through Lyra's body. Her arm felt like it was on fire, her veins boiling with agony. She almost collapsed, but Daniel's voice pulled her back. "Breathe. Focus. Fight with me." She inhaled sharply, her chest rising, her eyes burned with tears, but they also burned with light. The crew fell silent as they watched the struggle. They saw the black glue thrashing. They saw the girl trembling. But they also saw the human, refusing to back down. Every second was a battle, every breath a war, and still he stood, still he fought, as if the whole galaxy could not move him. The resin cracked again, small fragments falling. Lyra felt her fingers twitch, life sparking back into them. She gasped in shock. "I can feel it, I can feel my hand." Daniel gave a fierce grin. "Good. That means we're winning." But the resin answered with fury, tightening like a vice. Blood trickled from her skin where it dug in. She screamed again, but this time she did not beg for the blade. This time she screamed like a warrior, refusing to fall. Daniel adjusted the rhythm one more time, pushing the beats into a steady pounding. The medbay shook with sound, the floor vibrating under their feet. The resin writhed violently, confused, broken between fighting and retreating. Daniel leaned close, whispering through clenched teeth, "You will not take her. You will not win." Lyra's vision cleared for a moment, her eyes locking on Daniel's. In his face she saw pain, exhaustion, but also unshakable resolve. It gave her strength, a strength she never knew she had. Her scream turned into a cry of defiance. She yanked her arm forward with every bit of power left in her. The resin split open, pieces falling. The crew gasped in shock, but the glue clung tighter to what remained. It was not giving up. It was fighting with all its twisted life. Daniel roared, slamming his fist on the console to push the rhythm louder. The beats thundered like war drums, shaking the walls. The resin writhed, screeched, and then cracked further. Lyra collapsed forward, gasping for air. Daniel caught her, steadying her body with his arms. Her face was pale, but her eyes glowed. With determination, she whispered through broken breaths, "Don't! Stop!" Daniel smiled, fierce and tired. "I wasn't planning to." The resin pulsed one last time, throwing everything into its grip. Lyra's scream filled the medbay. But even in that scream, there was no surrender. And as Daniel's rhythm pounded harder, the battle reached its peak. The resin was no longer winning, it was breaking. The victory. The medbay shook with the thunder of sound. The rhythm pounded like a war drum, filling every corner of the room. The resin writhed, twisting violently as if in pain, its black surface cracking under the pressure. The crew stood frozen, their eyes wide as they watched the impossible unfold before them. For centuries, their people had cut and surrendered, but this night, one human had refused. Lyra's body trembled, sweat dripping down her face, her breaths sharp and shallow. Her arm still burned as the resin gripped her, but now she could feel it weakening. For the first time, she felt power in her fingers, faint but real. Her lips parted as she whispered, "I can move." Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "Good. Keep fighting. We're almost there." The resin pulsed harder, making one last desperate attempt. It tightened around her arm, the pressure sharp like knives. Lyra screamed, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she pushed back, straining against it with all the strength in her. Soul, her people would have surrendered. They would have begged for the blade, but she remembered Daniel's words. Humans don't give up, not ever. Daniel changed the rhythm again. Faster now, louder, stronger. The walls shook, the floor vibrated beneath their feet. The resin thrashed, splitting in violent cracks. Chunks of it broke off, hitting the floor with wet thuds. Each piece twitched, then went still, lifeless. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his voice fierce. Yes, break. You can't hold against us. Lyra pulled again, her voice a cry of pain and defiance. Her arm ripped free from the resin with a final tear. The substance shrieked like a living beast, then shattered into fragments. The black pieces scattered across the floor, twitching once, then lying dead. Silence filled the med bay, broken only by Lyra's ragged breaths. Her arm was bruised, swollen, marked with red cuts where the resin had dug into her skin. But it was hers, whole, alive. She stared at her hand in disbelief, her fingers trembling as she flexed them. I still have it, she whispered, her voice breaking. I still have my arm. Tears fell from her eyes, but they were not only from pain, they were from joy. Daniel sat back, his chest heaving, his face drenched in sweat, but his eyes burned with triumph. He gave her a tired smile. Told you, we never quit. The crew whispered among themselves, their voices filled with awe and fear. No one has ever beaten the living glue, one said. It should not be possible, another added. The elder stepped forward, his face pale. You are dangerous, human, he said softly. Dangerous in ways we never understood. Daniel met his gaze, his voice calm but sharp. Not dangerous because of weapons, not because of strength, but because we don't stop. He gestured to Lyra, who clutched her arm with trembling. Pride. This is what makes us human. Lyra looked at him, her heart heavy with gratitude. She had been ready to lose everything, ready to surrender to fear, but this human had stood in the fire and refused to bow, and somehow he had carried her with him. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You saved me, Daniel. Not just my arm. But me, Daniel gave a faint chuckle, shaking his head. You saved yourself. I just reminded you how to fight. Lyra lowered her gaze, but her tears sparkled with pride. For the first time, she did not feel like a victim. She felt like a survivor, a warrior. The resin's shattered remains lay across the floor, lifeless and broken. The crew stared at them, silent. They had feared this thing for centuries, but tonight, they had seen it defeated. And at the center of it all stood a single human, tired but unshaken. Daniel rose to his feet slowly, stretching his back. His eyes scanned the room, his voice quiet but firm. Remember this, he said. There is always another way. You just have to keep fighting until you find it. The words echoed through the med bay, heavy with meaning. The aliens lowered their heads, humbled. They had always chosen surrender, but this night had shown them a new truth. Lyra flexed her hand again, feeling life in every finger. Her chest swelled with something she had never felt before. Hope. She looked at Daniel with wonder. Her people had always said humans were reckless, but now she saw the truth. They were dangerous not because of their weapons, but because of their hearts. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the ship. Then Daniel gave a tired grin and said simply, We never stop fighting. And in that moment, Lyra understood this was the human way, not surrender, not despair, but persistence, defiance, and unyielding will. The will that had saved her life, the will that could change the stars,